So what we're expected to study in this topic is Newton's laws of motion. We'll look at the concepts of weight, momentum, forces, mass, and acceleration, this relationship. We'll look at conservation of momentum, collisions, and interactions between bodies in a momentum system. So this is all that we're going to be looking at in this particular topic. Let's look at Newton's laws of motion. This is the first bit. Okay, first, what's important here to understand is that Newton's laws of motion are basically these three physical laws that help us understand the relationship between forces, motion of body, and how basically the forces they cause things to accelerate, they cause things to stop, they cause things to move. ठीक है ये basic बहुत basics पे अगर हम जाएं तो this is all about the application of forces and the Newton's laws of motion they deal with these relationships basically. The first law of motion deals with force and inertia. The second law deals with force, mass, acceleration, whereas the third law deals with action and reaction. I'm going to get into the details of these three, but this is just an overview as to what these three laws are majorly about. So, first law of motion in detail. The first law states that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. Now, what's important in this law is that object at rest, object in motion, tends to stay in that motion or at rest unless acted upon by an external force. Now, this external force is basically the resultant force that we're talking about. Now, if we try to break this law down, if there is a resultant force, let's try to understand it backwards. If there is a resultant force, the object would not continue to stay at rest or in that motion. This is what it would mean, right? If the object is moving, it might stop. If the object is stopped, it might start moving because of that resultant force, because of that external force. If there is no external force, no resultant force, a moving object would continue moving. An object at rest would continue at rest. The
Okay.
object's motion will not change. This is what this law states. Okay. Object will keep doing what it was doing unless acted on by an external force. If the object was sitting still, it will remain stationary. If it was moving at a constant velocity, it will keep moving at a constant velocity. It takes force to change the motion of an object. Basically, it reinforces the same concept of ours that force can change the motion of an object. So the same thing is sort of reinforced through the first law and its application as well. Okay, now what is force that is basically causing all of this to happen? It is basically the simplest concept of push and pull. The action that has the ability to create or change motion, action that produces a reaction. Okay. Before getting into the discussion of force, I'm going to spend some more time on Newton's first law. Um, for example, assuming that an object, we also talk about straight line motion in first law of Newton. Imagine you were maybe sort of playing with this stone that was attached with a string and you're holding the string at point A. And point B is where the string is sort of attached with the stone. You're rotating it like this. The stone is moving in a circular motion. Now, what are the forces acting on this? There's like a tension force in A on in the string that is acting towards your hand. There's like air resistance that is constantly experiences. Okay. So as
ठीक.
soon as I remove this tension force by maybe cutting off the string, by maybe letting go of the string, the object at whatever place it will be on this circular track, on the circular orbit. For example, the object was here at this point, and this is where the string breaks. This is where the string breaks. The object would not continue its circular motion anymore. The moment the string breaks, the object would continue moving in a straight line from that instant. Imagine drawing a tangent at that point and then thinking of that as the motion of the object from that point onwards, the point at which the string breaks. Now, why does that happen? Because the string was providing a resultant force. This was basically the resultant force. And as you remove the resultant force, object continued moving in a straight line and it sort of deviated from its original motion. Isn't this what Newton's first law says? That if there is no
Yes.
resultant force, the object would continue in its original motion. As soon as there is a resultant force, the object would start moving in a straight line. As the resultant force is removed, sorry. Okay? When there is a resultant force, the object would not move in straight line. Okay? ये उल्टा मैंने आपको बता दिया था. When there is a resultant force, the object will not move in a straight line, but when the resultant force is removed, the object moves in a straight line. यानी वो अपने एक मोशन को कंटिन्यू कर लेगा इसके बाद. ठीक है? So it was the resultant force, it was the external force or the unbalanced force that kept the object moving in a circular orbit, जहां पे न्यूटन्स फर्स्ट लॉ बेसिकली डिविएट हो रहा था. अब फॉलो होना शुरू हो गया जैसे वो स्ट्रिंग ब्रेक हुई है. ठीक है?
ठीक.
ओके. Force, an action that can change motion. ठीक है? Force is what we call a push or a pull, or any action that has the ability to change an object's motion. Forces can be used to increase the speed of an object, okay, decrease the speed of an object, or change the direction in which the object is moving. जितना ज्यादा फोर्स होगा, देखो इनर्शिया क्या होता है, इट इज द बेसिकली द रेजिस्टेंस किसी भी ऑब्जेक्ट का, बिकॉज देयर इज ऑलवेज mass provides resistance, and that resistance is basically that sort of is in between the change of that motion, the tendency of an object to resist any change. This is an inertia. Force basically it overcomes that inertia. जितना ज्यादा inertia होगा, you will need उतनी ज्यादा force to produce an effect. Okay. Take for
ठीक.
example this case of, let's say, pushing an object, pushing a car. The heavier the car, the more force will be required to push it. You'll need more people to push it because you'll be sort of overcoming a larger inertia. Pushing a bicycle is a lot easier than pushing a car because bicycle has lesser inertia as compared to a car. Okay. Now, the concept of balanced and unbalanced forces. Balanced forces are basically when the objects are stationary. Again, Newton's first law says when the forces are balanced, the objects, object stationary कब होता है? When
Equilibrium.
there's no external force, when there's no resultant force. Resultant force होगी तो object stationary हो या constant motion में नहीं होगा जब resultant force होगी. Take for example the case of that string. The stone kept moving in circular motion because it had a resultant force. It wasn't moving with the constant velocity. It wasn't moving. Velocity was changing at every instant because that's what happens in circular motion. Velocity changes, direction changes. Forces are balanced. Velocity is constant. Objects are constant, either moving constantly or staying stationary. In this case, the forces on this book are sort of balanced. This is why the book stays in its position. When a car moves at a constant speed, forward force of the car is always equal to the backward force of the car. That is the reason why the car moves in a constant speed. Constant speed का मतलब ये नहीं होता forces cancel out हो गई हैं. Forces equal. ठीक है?
ठीक.
If the forces on an object are equal and opposite, or if the total force is zero, they are said to be balanced, and the object experiences no change in momentum. If they're not equal and opposite, or if their total forces is not zero, then the forces are unbalanced and the motion of the object changes. Motion only changes when the forces are unbalanced. Motion will not change when the forces are balanced. This is to understand here. Soccer ball is sitting at rest. It takes an unbalanced force to kick or change the motion. अब वो rest पे क्यों है? Because of its inertia. Inertia is the property of mass that is resisting all the changes. But as soon as you kick the football, you're providing it an external force, providing it a resultant force that causes the object to accelerate, to move. And that is the impact of the force. Now, balanced forces, या तो object at rest होंगे या object in motion. Balanced forces में when the objects are at rest, their velocity is zero, acceleration is zero, they're not moving. And when the objects are in motion and the forces are balanced, the velocity is non-zero, acceleration is zero. Now, zero acceleration means that velocity is constant, right? There's no change, there's no rate of change because there's no change in velocity. Velocity is, although velocity is not zero, velocity is there, but it's not changing. Imagine yourself driving a car at 10 meters per second. Now, there is velocity of 10 meters, but it's not changing. This is why there is no acceleration. Acceleration is zero, but velocity is there. I hope this is clear.
Then when would acceleration change?
जब velocity change होगी, या तो if you'll speed up or if you'll slow down, acceleration would be non-zero. Acceleration कब
ठीक
change? V minus u. जब velocity का difference कोई ना कोई आ जाए, जब velocity constant है तो difference तो कोई है ही नहीं इसका मतलब. So you need a difference in velocity. हो सकता है शुरू में आपकी speed कम हो initial और final आपकी speed ज्यादा हो चुकी हो. Difference आ गया velocity में तो v minus u by t की equation true हो जाएगी और acceleration change हो जाएगी फौरन से.
ठीक है.
Okay, Newton's first law apply to rocket lift off. Acha. Every object persists in its state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces impressed in it. Again, खुद से तो कोई object की force change नहीं होती, कुछ motion change नहीं होता unless there is a force. Before the rocket is fired, its airspeed is zero because it's at rest. When the engine is fired, thrust increases from zero, weight decreases slightly as fuel burns. Weight decrease होता जाएगा, thrust increase होती जाएगी. Resultant produce हो गई, thrust minus weight, और net force ऊपर की तरफ आ गई आपकी. ये resultant force है basically. Initially क्या हो रहा था? Weight और thrust balanced थे. But as the fuel started to burn, weight dropped, thrust increased, net force increased. Now, because you have a resultant force, the object will automatically move upwards. Thrust minus weight is your net force, is positive upward. Rocket accelerates upwards, velocity increases. Got it?
Okay. Yes.
The launch of a rocket is a perfect example of Newton's first law, or how resultant forces can make objects move. Okay, inertia पे we've had a discussion already, इसको हम skip करते हैं. Huh. If objects in motion tend to stay in motion, why don't moving objects keep moving forever? I mean, this is a very valid question. That if all of the forces are unbalanced or sort of balanced, why don't the objects keep moving forever? And the reason for that is because forces cannot stay balanced forever. There will be a time, there will be an instant that the forces will become unbalanced. One of the forces would change. For example, a car moving. Car moving at constant speed means the car has like balanced forces. Forward force, backward force is balanced. The engine thrust balances out the air resistance, the friction, all of the backward forces. But do you think the engine thrust would remain constant forever? No. The fuel would run, you would run out of fuel. Do you think air resistance frictions will remain constant? No, the tire might get worn off. Air resistance might change. There's no way that the forces will remain balanced forever. They would become unbalanced. Right? Book sliding across a
Right.
table slows down and stops because of the force of friction. Imagine on a horizontal surface of a table, horizontal surface, आपने एक book है, you slide it down, book will come to a stop eventually because of the friction. Football को gradually kick a football against the ground, तो जाते जाते बाद जाके would just stop because the forward force would run out. You'll have more backward force, more friction that would cause the object to stop. So forces, they become unbalanced. Okay, Newton's first law of motion declares that a force is not needed to keep an object in motion. For example, slide a book across a table and watch it slide to a rest position. This book motion is in motion on the top of table does not come to a rest position because of the absence of force. Rather, it is the presence of a force, that force being the force of friction, that brings the object to a position of rest. In the absence of friction of force of friction, the book would continue in motion that with the same speed and direction forever. यानी कहने का मतलब ये है कि force is like this thing that causes the object to stop. Object may continue moving because of the inertia at the end, लेकिन फिर force ही है जिसने आके रोक दिया है. Force of friction है जो resist करेगा. Ball thrown upwards would eventually slow down and fall because of force of gravity. For Penky, or this is like perfect case of an upward and downward motion. यहाँ पे आके peak touch हो गई, here it would slide down and eventually it would come to rest. How do these systems in a car overcome the law of inertia? Engine supplies force that allows you to change motion by pressing the pedal. Brake system is designed to help you change your motion by slowing down. देखो again, inertia क्या है? If the car is stopped, it is because of its inertia. How do you overcome the inertia? Because of the engine force. Acha. Now once the car is moving, it's because of its inertia. How do you overcome it? You apply the brakes. So if the car is moving in a straight line, because of inertia, how do you change direction? Because of the steering wheel. So these systems of the car, they overcome the law of inertia and let the car move. All right. Now these are some applications of Newton's first law. Blood rushes from your head to your feet while quickly stopping when riding on a descending elevator. Yeah, elevator नीचे आ रही होती है. Why? Because you and the elevator now are single object traveling downwards. The head of a hammer can be tightened onto the wooden handle by banging the bottom of the handle against a hard surface. To dislodge ketchup from the bottom of a ketchup bottle, it is often turned upside down and thrusted downwards at high speeds and then abruptly halted. Newton's first law. Okay, nobody's going to ask you about these, but they're just some real life examples. Okay, Kat, let's look at this question, for example. Acha, abhi tak is there any question?
नहीं.
Okay. If we look at this question, it says, Luke drops an approximately 5 kg fat cat weight 50 Newton off the roof of his house into the swimming pool below. Upon encountering the pool, the cat encounters a 50 Newton upward resistance force. Which one of the velocity time graphs best describes the motion of the cat? Support your answer with sound reasoning. Now the cat is dropped upwards. Drop होने के बाद वो swimming pool को it's gonna touch. और स्विमिंग पूल को टच करने के बाद हो सकता है वो अंदर भी जाए पूल के. What? Which graph describes the motion? What do you think? You can take some time to think about it.
A, क्योंकि velocity would be decreasing from.
Velocity would decrease, ठीक है, फिर
But because वो वापस 50 Newton upwards जा रहा होगा, so then it would increase back again. And B के अंदर तो फिर it's going
the
constant.
cat would encounter a 50 Newton upward force, but when it encounters a 50 Newton upward force, तो मुझे बताओ कि इसमें do you think the cat would bounce off the water?
नहीं.
नहीं ना. तो if you look at this graph, यहाँ पे assuming this is where the cat touches the water, but its speed increases again. अगर ये जो second part है, look at this part B, but at part B the speed again increases. So cat की speed, even if let's say goes into the water, the speed will not increase.
So then फिर A नहीं होगा.
ये नहीं होगा. अच्छा B चेक करते हैं, ठीक है. Cat की speed is increasing. पहली बात तो ये है कि when it's coming down, gravity is acting downwards. तो the falling objects में क्या होता है? Speed increase करती है. Falling under air resistance में maximum speed कब होती है? When the object is closer to the ground, right?
Yes.
So the cat's velocity would keep on increasing. ठीक है, ये यहाँ पे decreasing नहीं होगी, velocity increase होगी, तो ये ठीक है. And at the point when it experiences, देखो अब उसकी downward force भी क्या है? 5 kg है, 50 न्यूटन है, upward भी 15 है, balance forces हो गई एक point पे आके when it touches this water.
Yes.
downward balance. So air would continue moving at a constant speed. अब वो when it enters the water, it moves in the water at a constant speed. Yeah, this is the correct graph. Got it?
Okay. Yes.
In case of falling object, the cat will have the highest velocity near the ground. Its velocity would continue increasing. Graph B is correct. The cat first accelerates with a negative downward acceleration until it hits the water. Upon hitting the water, the cat experiences a balance of forces, 50 Newton downward due to gravity and 50 Newton upward due to water. Thus, the cat will finish its motion moving with a constant velocity. Graph B depicts both the initial negative acceleration and the final constant velocity. You see, that in this type of a question, when you draw out an explanation, you also need to refer to the shape of the graph, to why you exactly went on to drafting this explanation. Okay? What made you think that this is the right answer?
Like, but like in graph B, ऐसा है कि the velocity negative में जा रही है. So like, is that supposed to happen?
Yeah, velocity negative में इसलिए जा रही है क्योंकि object is working, object is sort of coming downwards. हम जब फॉलोइंग ऑब्जेक्ट देखते हैं ना, ये तो होता है अगर ऊपर जा रहे हो या नीचे आ रहे हो, वन ऑफ द साइड हैज टू बी नेगेटिव.
Okay.
अगर ये ऊपर भी होता तो इट इट वुड हैव बीन कंप्लीटली ओके. तो अब बिकॉज वी डोंट नो द अदर साइड ऑफ रेफरेंस, तो वी कैन अज्यूम कि दिस कुड बी नेगेटिव, दिस कुड बी पॉजिटिव. हाँ, अगर उन्होंने नेगेटिव कह दिया ठीक है, नेगेटिव. अगर ये ऊपर ब्लू लाइन बनाते हैं तो वो भी सही होनी थी. ठीक है.
ठीक. Okay.
I think we're gonna keep this Newton's first law discussion till here. Um, I have like a theory assignment for you, a short theory assignment. Hold on.